My name is Irena Swanson. One of my favorite things to do is sewing quilt tops. Many designs require accuracy, and to achieve that accuracy I find it very helpful to mark on fabric prior to sewing. Today I want to show you streamlined and very efficient mass marking on 3 different projects that are behind me, and these will end up in 3 different quilts, and there are different stages in the method that I call tube piecing. It starts with sewing strips together with some offset, either scooting down or scooting up. When we have enough strips for a comfortable width, I press all seam allowances and then trim off the protrusions, after which I sew the 2 outside strips together, and at that point I get a first tube, primary wide tube, such as this one from a different project. A primary wide tube typically gets cut into primary narrow tubes, like this. Here is a primary narrow tube from a different project. And primary narrow tubes get sewn together into secondary wide tubes, such as this one. Or they can get cut across at some angle, after which you get a long, narrow parallelogram, or in this instance, rectangle. And these X primary narrow tubes can get sewn together, in this instance interspersed with solid strips. The scoot here, the trim, determines the angle of all subsequent pieces. So here the angle is 60 degrees, over here it is 45 degrees, here it is 30 degrees, here it is 90 degrees, and over here I am making angles arctangent of a half that can make squares like this. And this scooting up produces almost the same squares, except that the slants of the triangles go the other way. Any angles work for tube piecing, and to find out more about the method, visit www.tubepiecing.com. So let's get started here. For least waste of fabric, you want these offsets to be consistent, and on narrower strips the offset here is smaller than on wider strips. To mass mark, take all the strips of the same width. Here there have 6 of these strips. I line them up at the top selvage, but I stagger them so that these right margins are exposed by about 1/8 of an inch up to 1/4 of an inch. If the selvage is very crooked, you may want to trim it, but really at this point the accuracy is not that important. And then I know that for these examples the offset here is 3 9/16 of an inch. So I measure that out from the beginning, 3 9/16 of an inch, and I make a mark here in the margins. So now there is a mark everywhere, and when I come to this strip with a different strip, I know exactly where to position the second strip. Now for scooting up, these tags are actually on the back sides of this fabric. So there is a mark on the back side of the fabric on the right. So I could take these, turn them back sides, and again line up. Precision is not absolutely important. Measure of 3/16 of an inch. And these particular strips are ready to be incorporated either into this construction or into that one. When I use dark strips or very model strips, my markers, my chalk may not show up so well. So in that case, I will use pins. So in any case, mark up all the strips and do the sewing and pressing and so on until you get primary wide tube. Now let's move to the second project. Here I am in the process of making scrappy looking log cabin blocks, red center, and I'm starting to do the rounds. Everything will be done with tube piecing. And what is important here, that these seams line up across the non-pieced strips. So for that I have to do the markings in the non-pieced strips, And again, I will do mass marking. I take all the strips that I want of equal width and I line them up, and the top selvage, stagger them out so that their right selvages are showing. And now, rather than doing the measurements 3.5 inches, 4.5 inches, and so on, I just take a representative X primary narrow tube. This will have to be sewn on. Some are here and some are here. And then all I do is I flip over, make sure that I expose all the edges by at least 1/8 of an inch up to 1/4 of an inch. And then wherever the seam on the piece strip comes to the edge, I extend the line from that point all the way to the edges. So here's one, here's another one, and I can do another one. And I do this throughout. And because my angles here are 90 degrees, I'm lucky. I just flip this construction over. All I have to do is mark on this side, mark on this side, and so on. Now, not all of my X primary narrow tubes have to have 90-degree angles. If you have different angles, you get the idea for how to mark, but the other side is a little harder to accomplish. Now, for the third project, here are some sample primary narrow tubes that get sewn together. I need consistent gaps here. These gaps are designed so that I can make rows of triangles. So these rows of triangles will be wider, and I will have 6 of them already automatically sewn together, but it's important that these gaps here are systematic. So I take the primary narrow tubes, I stagger them as though they were strips, except that they're not. And it's important that these, where the seams get to the edge, they line up perpendicular to the edges. So you can probably see the perpendicularity. And then whatever the offset is measured to be, it might be 1 inch up from the seams, it might be an inch down from where the seams get to the edge. Whatever the requirement is for the project, mark in all the visible places, and then this only marks this side. You also have to mark on the other side, so you have to readjust all the tubes on the other sides and mark again. And so wherever, when you're sewing, at sewing time, the seam from the tube on the right gets matched up with the mark on the tube on the bottom. Please visit my www.tubepiecing.com.